Good evening. I would like to call the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee meeting of September the 11th, 2019 to order. And I would like to ask everyone to please join me in a minute of silence as we recognize and remember on this day, 18 years ago, on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, the innocent men, women, and children who lost their lives on an airplane at the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and on the streets of New York. Civil servants, firefighters, police officers, and military personnel who have dedicated and lost their lives protecting the safety, freedom, and democracy. And for the thousands of families and friends who mourn those lost, please know that we think of all of you today. Thank you. In the event, I have a safety announcement now. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. If assistance is required, please see our clerk, Trish Sarnicki. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, the Town of Lincoln committee and council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. I would like to thank the public for attending this meeting this evening, and I want to remind everyone of our rules of engagement to please be respectful while others are speaking and to please refrain from clapping. Delegations will have 5 minutes to speak and are asked to stay focused on the agenda item. And please remember to silence all cellular devices. Roll call this evening. We have all of council here with the exception of Councillor McPherson. We have a number of staff here, both on the back bench as in the chamber. Thank you for your attendance. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. We have a motion to amend the order of agenda items this evening. Items 7.4, 7.5, and 7.6, reports PW 2819, PW 2719, and PW 2919 respectively will be considered first, following with a motion to proceed into closed session, after which we will conclude discussion with each motion for items 7.4, 7.5, and 7.6. Following these motions, council will consider all other items, beginning with report PW 2519, and following with all regularly scheduled agenda items. Amending this order requires a majority vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Please note, we also have an additional item to add to the regular agenda. There will be a motion to waive the rules and add a late addition to the agenda as item 7.7. This will occur immediately after the regular scheduled items. Item number 4, statutory public meetings. There are no statutory public meetings on the agenda. Delegations, we have no delegations this evening. So we'll move right into the consent agenda, which we have 4 items. Item 6.1, the Age-Friendly Citizen Committee minutes of May 15th. Item 6.2, the Age-Friendly Citizen Committee minutes of June 6, 2019. Item 6.3, the Age-Friendly Citizen Committee minutes of June 12th, 2019. And item 6.4, the Active Transportation Citizen Committee minutes of June the 20th, 2019. Would any member like to remove any of these items from the consent agenda to discuss? There being none, we will require a mover for the motion to pass items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4 on the consent agenda. Councillor Timmers, thank you. All in favor? And that is passed. Item number 7, our regular agenda. Please note, following the next three items, we will be going into closed session to discuss. We are now considering item 7.1, PW 2819, the Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Condition Assessment Project Award. Are there any questions from council? There being no further discussion, we are now considering item 7.2, PW 27-19, the Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Portion, east of Martin, Environmental Assessment Project Award. Are there any questions from council? There being no further discussion, we are now considering item 7.3, PW 29-19, the Emergency Flooding Update, Lakeshore Roads. Are there any questions from council? We will now go into closed session. For council to go into closed session, we must provide notice. To proceed, I will ask for a vote, which requires 2/3 to consider the item immediately in closed session. All in favor? That is unanimous. Under Section 239 of the Municipal Act, notice is hereby given that committee adjourn to closed session in order to address items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 on the agenda regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board as it pertains to reports PW 28-19, PW 27-19, 2019, and PW 29, 2019. And I require a mover for that. Councillor Reimer, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I will require a mover to reconvene into open session. Councillor Reimer, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. So we are now considering item 7.1, PW 28-19, the Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Condition Assessment Project Award. We have a motion to receive and file report PW 28-19, Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Condition Assessment for information, and to approve the company of WSP Canada, Inc. to be retained to provide engineering services, and approve the mayor and clerk to sign and seal contract documents on behalf of the municipality. We require a mover for the motion. Councillor Timmers, all in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.2, PW 27-19, the Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Portion, east of Martin, Environmental Assessment Project Award. We have a motion to receive and file report PW 27-19, the Lakeshore Roads Shoreline Protection Portion, east of Martin, Environmental Assessment and Conceptual RFP Award, and to approve the company GHD Limited to be retained to provide engineering services, to approve the project to be funded through the gas tax reserves, and approve the mayor and clerk to sign and seal documents on behalf of the municipality. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Pachariva, all in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.3, PW 29-19, the Emergency Flooding Update, Lakeshore Roads. We have a motion to receive and file report PW 29-19, the Emergency Flooding Update, Lakeshore Roads. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Rinjema, all in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.4, PW 25-19, the Draft Transportation Master Plan. Staff will be providing a presentation along with Brett Sears from WSP. Are there any questions from council? Director Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of committee tonight. So we're very excited to be here tonight to bring our final draft transportation master plan document before you. This has been a very long process. We've been at this for 2 years. There's been a lot of work that's went into this. We've done a lot of consultation. So that's really helped shape what you're looking at tonight. What you can expect tonight is Brett Sears will introduce from WSP. He's going to do a summary presentation of the document. He's going to focus on summarizing a lot of the key recommendations that have come forward, and as long as a lot of the policies too that we're proposing through this process, and relate that to all the key elements related in the Transportation Master Plan to give committee a summary of that, and also talk about our implementation plan, because we know that is council's expectation is that although we have these recommendations coming forward, we have to action these items and move forward with that. So we'll be sharing that as well tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brett.
Thank you, Director Graham. Before Mr. Sears speaks, I just want to make a comment that this is a futuristic document. We've been working on this for the last 2 years. It is a document that we will now move forward to guide us on many things, and I just want to recognize the Director of Transportation for the region, Carolyn Riel, is with us this evening. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining us, and also our regional councillor, Councillor Foster. As we move forward, this is a collaboration that the town of Lincoln will definitely require total support of the region, so we appreciate you being here this evening. Mr. Sears.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. It's really my pleasure to be here tonight to tell the good news of 2 years of work. We have a fairly hefty document, or a series of documents in front of you, so I will try to hit the highlights here tonight, and then I would be happy to answer any of your questions. We certainly have enjoyed working with the town staff, so kudos to Dave and to Walter and Carrie and the team who have been working with us for the duration of this. So it really has been a team effort, and we're happy to be able to partner with the town and set the town up for success. As you said, Chair, this is a visionary document, and I'm going to touch on that right after this first slide. I'm going to start off with what is a TMP, a Transportation Master Plan. It's good to have a good reminder of what we've tried to accomplish, and then we'll go through the process quickly and some of the engagement. I'm going to focus my remarks on the recommendations, what is coming out of this plan. And those are multimodal for all the different modes of travel. There's a number of policies that support the plan that are intricately involved to make this happen. There is a financial cost. And like I said, I'd be happy to answer questions. I know that Dave and Walter are here to help as well. So just to go a little bit of a background, what is a Transportation Master Plan? It is a dynamic document. It is something that is often updated on a regular basis, typically perhaps every 5 years, sometimes in line with an official plan. Now, the region recently prepared a regional Transportation Master Plan, so a number of the municipalities within the region are now doing specific ones for their town or city. It does address all modes of transportation. And we're trying to not reinvent the wheel. Even though we're talking transportation, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We want to support the official plan and other work, the good work that the town has already done. It is not necessarily, it is not a detailed design for specific transportation improvements. One time I had someone at a public meeting say, "When's the bulldozer coming?" I was like, no, that is not what the transportation is for. The bulldozer is not warming up. And it's not a study of very specific issues. This is a town-wide study. We've tried to address issues that are applicable across the town. We have done some detailed analysis, but typically the Transportation Master Plan is looking at a town-wide to ensure that we have connectivity across the town. As Mr. Graham mentioned, we did start about 2 years ago in the fall of 2017. We've had several rounds of consultation. We've done a lot of technical analysis and some policy work to get us to this point here tonight. Speaking of the engagement, we had 2 rounds. One started at the end of 2017 and went into 2018. One of them was this year. We were over just at the Fleming Center around March break for a free skate, and we had some hot chocolate and pizza, and we had several different hands-on activities that people could participate in. Walter was really good about saying, people, go have a skate, then you'll be hungry, come back here and give us some feedback and have some pizza. So that went fairly well, I thought. And so we were in different camps during March break. We've had different ways for people to engage online and in person throughout the study. And so some of those key themes that we're trying to address here, not surprising in terms of active transportation. What do we mean by active transportation? Brett, tell me something in English that I can understand. We're often thinking about walking or cycling, but my older daughter sometimes will rollerblade to school. My younger daughter likes to ride a skateboard. So anything where we're getting around without using some motorized device would be an active transportation. We've been talking about traffic calming, transit, the road network. Goods movement has been a prime topic for sure. So let's get into the recommendations. We've tried to group the recommendations into 3 main categories. Generally, in the next 5 years, that would be considered the short term. Generally, by the year 2031 would be the medium term, and then by the year 2041 or beyond for the long term. We have quite a few recommendations. Like I said, we're trying to set the town up for success. We're not going to put everything in the first year. That's just not possible. So we've tried to have a very methodical approach to what would provide the greatest benefit and phase the recommendations in that way. So we have a laundry list here with different modes. I'm going to just try to focus on a few of them. For the short term, our active transportation recommendations are divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary, and lo and behold, we put the primary ones in the short term, and you'll see that the secondary ones are in the medium term, and the tertiary ones are in the long term. One item that has been a key item has been the goods movement, so we're trying to address that with a bypass of Ontario and King. Now this, as you've already mentioned, Chair, will require a careful consultation and back and forth with the region because some of these are regional roads. Ontario and King both are regional roads, as is Mountain. But in talking to some of the people who are, some of the quarries, if we can provide an alternative that is feasible and reasonable, they'd be happy to do it. And we said, well, how would you make the trucks go that way? And we said, well, this is, if we tell them they have to go this way, if we find out they don't go that way, they won't work for us anymore. They're not employed by the quarry, but they need that work. They're self-employed or employed by others. So we have shown on some of the maps that if we use Mountain, instead of going north on Mountain, taking a left on King and then a right on Ontario, if we went on Mountain, took a right on King, and then to Bartlett, we could bypass that critical intersection of Ontario and King. That's something we are showing in the short term. Like I said, those are regional roads. We have to continue the dialogue with the region to help make that happen. There have been some concerns of specific intersections, so one of them is King at Stadtobauer. If you look at the traffic volume simply from a car perspective, you don't need a signal there. But we've tried to consider some other factors as well in terms of can you see well, is it a safety concern? And that is like a key desire line for anyone going to the Fleming Center. But there's no very convenient signalized crossing or controlled crossing to get there. So we think there are a number of reasons, like an intersection like that could be signalized, and that's one thing that will continue, the town will continue to have to work with the region to bring that to fruition. There's a number of other recommendations, and then we've also tried to show them on a map. The main thing I want to show on these maps is that our recommendations are town-wide. It's not only focused in one area, but we're looking across the town, and the different colors are for different types of modes. So we're looking at active transportation, which I'll focus on in a few minutes, but also the goods movement route and select improvements to the road network. We recognize that the financial resources are limited, so we want to make sure we have a good technical reason for a recommendation so that we can wisely spend those resources. Medium term, once again, for different modes of travel. The ones I wanted to focus on here, as I was saying, a secondary loop for active transportation. We also have some improvements on Ontario Street, and specifically for the town on Green Lane, possibility of a GO train station there, so we want to set the town up for success. If we can get the infrastructure around that station ready, when that day comes when it is there, it'll work, hopefully it's going to work better. We already have infrastructure in place so people could get there in multiple modes, be it by foot, by bike, by local bus, and of course by car. Also on this, and I'll just show it on the map, we recognize there's a challenge right along the lakefront in terms of erosion and the lakefront roads needing constant repair. So we have identified that a east-west road in that part of the town is something that should be looked into and land protected for in order to address that issue, at least from a transportation perspective with erosion. And then long-term. So these are beyond the year 2031, but this is a visionary document, so we want to continue to think what are the next things coming. So we once again have different recommendations for multimodal travel. And then this is one where we see an ultimate solution to goods movement, and that ultimate solution, which the region is heavily involved in, might not be here in Lincoln. And that could be next door in Grimsby, with a route that I think you're well aware of in the past and has been explored to the Mountain to Bartlett connection there, or Mountain to Park, excuse me. Park to Bartlett. I made another mistake. Can you forgive me for that one? Hopefully that's the only one, Park to Bartlett. So we have also a map for the long-term recommendations. I wanted to take a few moments to focus on active transportation because we have tried to supplement the Transportation Master Plan with an entire active transportation strategy. So the main tenets of the active transportation strategy are reflected in the Transportation Master Plan. You can get the details in the strategy where we've gone into it's a standalone report. We've gone into more details. We've done the costing down to the dollar. I was like, oh man, do I really want to write that down? Don't hold me to it exactly to the dollar, please. But we have done active transportation all across Ontario, and our firm is heavily involved with the manual that has like the best practices for active transportation design. So we do have a plan for the town that is trying to make sure we have connectivity across the town in like these short, medium, and long-term recommendations. We've done a lot of field investigation to try to come up with the best way to go about for active transportation. I think I've actually maybe already summarized this slide in terms of we've looked at what you already have, what's already been proposed. We've gone out with our field work. We've tried to come up with the best way. This is something near and dear to my heart. I bike to work, not today, but I biked to work yesterday and hope to later this week as well. The weather is still nice, and even if it's not nice, I still bike to work because I got to get there somehow. And so that's why we want to be able to make it viable. So that's why in this plan we have tried to cover the base and provide a number of different facilities. Facilities are often based on like the volume of the road, how much space is available. We don't always want to use space as a limiting factor, but that is part of the equation. So we have looked at the different roads, the volumes, a number of different factors to come up with, well, what do we want to recommend in terms of different facility types? So on this map here, there's a lot of different colors on there, and what I really want you to see is how it is comprehensive. It does cover the entire town. It's trying to make sure there's no missing links. I know for myself in biking, I'll be on a bike lane or some kind of bike facility, and it magically disappears. But I'm not at my destination. So then I'm stuck, traveling on the road or in mixed traffic with the cars. And so we're not going to be able to solve that I live in Markham. I'm not talking about here in that case, but we're not going to be able to solve this overnight for Lincoln, but we do have a plan that would be interconnected, that would allow people to get from place to place on some type of active transportation facility. And so here's just a zoom in we have a zoom in map of the different main communities in Lincoln, so in Beamsville, Jordan, and Vineland. Different facility types. Some of these are regional, some of these are town, and a different set of phasing. As I said, we did our preliminary review of looking at what you already have. We tried to think, what is going to work. Transportation Master Plan is a big document, but please don't leave it on the shelf, Walter. Make sure it's a living document that you're using. We've tried to set this up, and I know we won't leave it on the shelf. I know that. We talked about that beforehand. This is like the work plan for the town going forward in the next 5 years. We want to set it up so that it's feasible, that it can be implemented. That's the key thing in terms of not having it on the shelf, that it can be implemented, and then we can see how it's working through monitoring. And so we do have a phasing plan I think I've already touched on in terms of short, medium, and long term. With that, I want to talk about some of the policies then that go into supporting this. We kind of see the policies as somewhat of the legs that are going to help the top of the table stand up. We need to have these policies to go hand in hand with the bricks and mortar infrastructure improvements that we are recommending. So one of them is an umbrella policy of complete streets, the concept that the transportation system should be designed for all road users, and all modes of transportation. The region has already put forward a couple of excellent documents on this, so we want to leverage that. So we've come up with something specific for the town. Doesn't mean necessarily that each and every single road has to be able to accommodate each and every mode of travel, but we need to have an integrated network so that if this road doesn't accommodate some mode, there's an alternate route that's convenient. that is the overarching policy that we've tried to develop, the Transportation Master Plan, with this concept. And we have that policy as one of the appendices to the TMP. Traffic calming has been a big item that's come up often as the town is growing. Everyone sees that the volume of vehicle traffic is increasing. So we've wanted to have very much a data-driven approach, a transparent approach, but also one that's technically sound and data-driven. We've looked at what is being done in other communities around Lincoln. We've looked at different ways to do traffic calming. The one that most people come to their mind is the speed bumps. So that is one approach. People will say they want that. As soon as you put it in, they'll say they don't like it. Not all the time, but so we're trying to look at multiple ways to address traffic calming, and actually complete streets is one of those ways. Sometimes if a street is too wide, it can encourage people to drive faster, so there's a way to maybe even just with paint make it narrower so that the eye and the brain are thinking, I should be traveling slower. We have a workflow, once again, a transparent process that people can understand. If it meets our certain criteria, it will go onto one section of the workflow. If it does not, we're not just going to say, oh, I don't think that's worthwhile, I'm going to throw it over my shoulder and too bad for you. There is a process that we would go through, that the town would go through, to make sure that we could address each of the requests. Some of them, we might have a more fulsome discussion and might need more investment of time and resources, and others maybe there is something that can address the challenge in a more straightforward way. But the key thing is we have a transparent process that is data-driven, that should be evidence-based. And that's really what we've tried to show in one of the appendices where we have the traffic calming policy. On-street parking has come up. Now typically when we're doing this work, on-street parking is often an issue in the downtown locations. So it was interesting for us that the most common thing that we heard through the process is that this was more for residential areas. And so we've tried to look at what other municipalities are doing and to understand what the challenge is. I know for myself personally, we have a 2-car garage. Fortunately for me, we only have 1 car, because half of my garage is full of junk, like junk that we agreed we wouldn't move into this house, but somehow it ended up there anyhow, and it's still sitting in that garage 3.5 years later. Fortunately, we only have the 1 car that still fits there. But other people, maybe they have 2 cars. If they have the garage full of something other than a car and 1 car on the driveway, then they end up with 1 on the street. And now if they have people over, can they find a place to park on the street? So this is something that has come up a number of times. We tried to look into what can we recommend for something like this. There was even a recommendation for some type of clean out the garage campaign. I know that's a really touchy issue in my household. I don't know about everyone else's household, but I'd love to get that stuff out, but I'm only part of the equation. I don't know how well that would go over. Oh, I would love it though. I'll sign right up. But can we look at seeing what are other people doing? Can we put a strategy in place to evaluate the parking needs? Is there, like right now, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. This is a really tricky one, I think. We've gone back and forth with the town staff on this one. But once again, we want to make sure that we're doing something that is like in line with the best practice. What are others doing? Not that they're doing something right and we're doing something wrong, because what we saw is that the town is already following pretty much a best practice. So there could be other things to consider. Do we have to have time of day restrictions? Are there ways to optimize the use of municipal parking lots? I was already talking about the clean out the garage, different educational campaigns, and then establish a strategy if we see that the problems persist. Transportation demand management. Another big phrase. Basically, we're trying to look at the peak travel hours and are there ways that we can reduce the number of vehicles on the road? And that's what this is all about. Is that from working from home? Is that working flex hours so you're not on the road from 5 to 6 or from 8 to 9 in the morning or 5 to 6 in the afternoon? Right now, like for instance, you have the there's the MTO parking, carpool lot at Ontario and the South Service Road. So that is an example of transportation demand management in terms of someone could park there, two people can park there, and maybe commute together. We have several recommendations regarding that. This requires some working with different employers or different major employers to try to get some buy-in. We do this a lot in the Markham area. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. If you have to think of yourself however you travel today, what would it take for you to change how you travel? It might take a lot. So this is one that takes like continuous effort to really make happen. And then, here I'm almost at the end of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the future for a second. We want to make sure that the town is future ready. What are the trends that are coming that we should be preparing for now? So for instance, in the MTO parking lot, there is an electric vehicle charging station. So that's one part of being future ready in terms of, do we want to have those at municipal lots as well? Should there be one here at Town Hall or other places that are on town property? You don't have to give away the electricity for free, but that could enable, even if they had to pay, that would enable people who have those vehicles to maybe use them more or get more people to shift to those types of vehicles. One item here is also Vision Zero. So the region has, this is regarding road safety, so the region is already working on this, and so we can, leverage that and think about, we want to make sure that there are no fatalities or serious injuries on the transportation network in Lincoln. So how can we position the town for that? I think, fortunately, there have not been many. I was talking to Walter. There might have been like 1 or 2 in his 10-plus years here, so that's great. But we've put in a couple of items into the Transportation Master Plan, looking at the future trends to help make sure the town is ready for that. I'm going to just touch briefly on financial costs. So here we have tried to round to the thousands in terms of active transportation and roads. These are related to projects on the town roads. So the active transportation, trying to, once again, spread the costs over some period of time. And we have a whole technical appendix that gives all the details. Like I said, for active transportation, down to the dollar. That is part of the Transportation Master Plan. I greatly appreciate your attention this evening, and myself, along with Dave and Walter, we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. I do at this time want to thank Walter. He's lived this for the last 2 years and has really been the champion in this project. So thank you, Walter, and thank you, Director Graham. Do we have any questions on this TMP? Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair Renee. Through you to the presenter, very in-depth document. I did read quite a bit of it, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. Some questions I have, what were you thinking, I don't know if you have a copy of this, but with regards to the walking, the consultation summary, page 13, with regards to the walking comfort, there seems to be quite a bit of comfort with the ability to walk and a bit of an uncomfortable feeling towards cycling. I don't know, you're not there, but
He's in the big one.
Okay, page 13?
it would be in the master plan or this one here. But,
Okay.
So essentially, like, residents polled seem quite comfortable with cycling in one, very uncomfortable with cycling. However, they're comfortable with walking. And then when I look on page 33, the appetite to spend municipal dollars it seems disproportionate to the data. Like, I'm seeing that there seemed to be more of an appetite to spend money on walking improvements rather than cycling improvements. Is that an anomaly, or does that make sense, or can anyone comment to that, or how? Am I
through-
throwing a bit of a curveball?
That's okay. Through the chair to the councillor. When we think about cycling, we have there's a common diagram that is used to look at the type of cyclist. There are some who are fearless and will go anywhere. There are some who are enthusiastic and confident. I guess that's where I would find. There's a big group that wishes they could go cycling, and then there's also a fairly large group that wouldn't even consider it. And so, but there's many more people who will walk. And so I'm wondering if the people who are walking are thinking, well, I'm not going to bike anyhow, so we might as well invest more in walking. I don't know for sure, because like the public input, we didn't do a statistically valid survey. It was people self-selecting to provide us feedback, be it online, be it at face-to-face public consultation. So we're reporting what we heard, but it's not like we did an online survey that was 95% statistically valid, or a telephone survey or anything like that. So I don't know for sure why that came back that way.
Okay.
But I would say that maybe some people are feeling that they wouldn't bike, and so they don't want to put the resource in that, perhaps, because it seems like too big of a step for them to consider biking, unless perhaps it was like a completely separated facility. This is just my hypothesis.
Fair enough. Thank you. And just one more question, and I'm happy that there's members of the region here hearing this question, because I'm a proponent for safe cycling, and one of the routes I use is through the Jordan Hollow, King Street. It's a major route that cyclists use, and I'm just hoping that one day it'll be safe enough for myself to feel comfortable cycling, and that's what I'm really hoping for. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is the allocation of funds towards safe cycling. Especially if you want your son or daughter to ride their bike to school. So that's the point I'm trying to make with that. Thank you.
Councillor Patriva.
Oh. Thank you, Chair Brunei. I thought I was going to be much later in the queue, but I've got my little sticky notes here, so a bunch of questions for our presenter. With respect, and I'm going to go along the same line as Councillor Michalak. So with respect to the active transportation recommendations, having recently attended the AMO conference and participated in the 2-hour bicycle ride around the city of Ottawa, which was put on by the Cycling Coalition, wondering why there is only 0.8 kilometers recommended of cycle tracks, 25 kilometers of buffered paved shoulders, and another, say, 8 kilometers of paved shoulders. We were told on this ride by the City of Ottawa's transportation engineer and cycling expert that cycle tracks are in fact cheaper. They provide a safer environment for riding. So wondering why this would be the case. So why paved shoulders as opposed to cycle tracks if it's cheaper and safer?
Through the chair to the councillor. The recommended facility type is based on a number of different criteria. For a cycle track, that would typically be above the pavement level, so you'd have to be in an urban condition. So a lot of the places of the paved shoulder, that would be on a rural road with no sidewalk, with just a ditch, right? There's no curb or gutter. And so we're looking at the volume on these roads, and certainly what we see is we're wanting more and more separation. But the data that I have is more and more separation costs more and more money, and so we have to balance some of these items with well, what are the number of vehicles on that road? Do we need to have, what level of separation do we want? And if the road is a rural road with no curb, we're not going to be able to have something above the curb unless we were to put in some kind of physical bollard or some kind of physical concrete something. So in a lot of these cases, we would recommend a paved shoulder that has the added benefit, there's several added benefits of that. If there's no cyclists there, it enables farm equipment to move slightly over to the side. It's easier to pass them. With the paved shoulder, then your road typically lasts longer because the cars are not driving right on the edge. In the urban, right here in downtown Beamsville, a cycle track could be an appropriate facility type. But there's a lot of part of the town where that probably isn't the best facility type, given
Okay.
all the different factors.
Okay, I get that, but this being a futuristic document, Prudham's is coming on board, complete streets, I would have liked to see that number a heck of a lot higher, and over the next little bit, we'll be clanging that bell for that. With respect, I got a couple more questions, Chair, if I may. And in the Transportation Master Plan on page 13, we identify the town of Lincoln has a higher auto ownership rate than anywhere in Niagara, 2.1. So I get the clean your garage is a noble concept, theoretically. But what we should be looking at is ways to increase our limited supply of parking, be it on-street parking, because we talk about, we don't have any parking restrictions. Well, we do. So cul-de-sacs, we limit the parking from November the 1st to April 1st. So we've already created like a two-tier system here. If you live on a cul-de-sac, you're out of luck. But we allow the on-street parking in the winter that then hampers snow removal. So just, wondering how it's a chicken and egg scenario, right? But how do we get there? How do we say to the public, like, this is important and everyone has to do their part?
Through the chair to the counselor, that's why this is a multimodal plan.
Okay.
That's why we have a whole active transportation strategy. That's why we have a transportation demand management policy. We have been working with the town's relatively new transit coordinator, who used to be at Niagara Region, so she knows what the region is planning, to try to see like what are the next steps to enhance the U-Link service that you've already started.
Okay.
The whole complete streets umbrella policy is trying to address this. But we do recognize it is going to be a challenge. People have been concerned about the rising congestion, but it hasn't, it's not to the point where they might consider an alternative mode at this point. It doesn't seem, right? But we have the carpool lot at South Service Road, not far from here, just down the road, right? South Service Road and Ontario Street. So if people were going further afield and they knew another person going that same way, they could use that approach. We've tried to put those mechanisms in place, but travel behavior is one of the hardest things to change.
Yeah.
And so like for any future developments, such as Prudham, we want to make sure from day one, they have sidewalks, they have cycling facilities, they have transit service.
Yeah.
If someone moves into Prudham and they only can get around by car, we lost them. We
Yeah.
lost them.
Okay, good. Excellent. One last question, Chairman?
Yes, absolutely.
And it's with respect to Ontario Street, so Green Lane to the QEW. So there was a recommendation in the report about widening it northbound for future. But anyone who's tried to get off Ontario Street at 5 o'clock on a weeknight, the ramp is backed up to Lincoln Avenue on the QEW. So I'm wondering why the recommendation to widen north and southbound isn't there or considered.
Through the chair to the counselor, that is a regional road, so we'll be working with the region for solutions on that. I'm looking over to Walter maybe to help me we don't want to widen, we're looking at the volumes constantly, right? And we're not gonna only be looking at the volumes. We have to understand the personal experience, the public's experience, but we're also trying to balance the perception with the data and the money, so that we're not using the limited resources on something. We want to make sure we get the most benefit for where we're putting that money. And so I hear your challenge. I hear what you're saying in terms of the experience. I would say that in our analysis, we didn't determine that need based on the data, but this is why we're here.
Okay.
To hear your comments tonight, so that we can see, is this gonna meet the town's needs, or do we have to, this is a draft document, do we
Okay.
have to make some changes?
Okay, thank you.
Mary Ston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a real pleasure to have you here tonight. 2 years, it's a long time. And, you know, during the consultation, I'm not sure that when you see the final document and you realize the intensity of the decision-making process, not just in terms of reading this document, but how we're going to go forward. And, you know, the master plan, the town has now, I think, received 3 master plans in the last, I think this is the 3rd one now, just in the last year and a half. And you're absolutely right. This just cannot go on a shelf. And a complex document like this could very well end up on the shelf if we don't dedicate staff members to know about this and to spend time on it, so that the appropriate guidance is there when we need to start making these decisions. It is a vision for how we're going to grow. I started looking at master plans from a lot of different places. Sometimes you wish you were building your community from scratch. It's just, it is a real challenge to try and blend the roadways together. And certainly, I recall very clearly when we were looking at 19th Street in Jordan, how much difficulty we had with the roads engineers, because the suggestion, the recommendations about how it needed to be constructed seemed to be so out of sync with the way we wanted our community to work. And I still feel that way, but when you look at the growth numbers, you begin to understand that you really are planning for the future. So you've given us lots of options, and even though, you know, I consider Councillor Pachariva to be, you know, very knowledgeable about active transportation. He and Councillor Brunet spent a lot of time on this. It's not that other people won't catch up, but they know what they're talking about. When they start coming up with suggestions and asking questions, I listen to them because I know that they've been around these streets a lot. The biggest change, I think, is it is a high-level tool, but the whole concept of data-driven is going to be important. And what I mean by that is that in the past, Carolyn comes and we are, you know, we give her a hard time and tell her how busy the streets are, and she must think, yeah. And then we start looking at the provincial perception of numbers. What are their numbers? And that's likely what the region are looking at. So what does that density look like? It looks like massive to us. It looks like too much. We can't stand any more of that whole experience. It's just overwhelming. And so there's going to be a language, I think, of traffic by the numbers as per the standards and the guidelines, provincial standards and guidelines, which the region follows, and our knowledge and ongoing understanding of what we are willing to accept and what people are willing to tolerate. Because I can see some major road reconstruction. It doesn't jump out at you. It's talked about, but you don't pull out that great big drawing and say, okay, we're gonna put a ring road here. This is what it's gonna look like. And it's big and it's very imposing. So I think there's going to have to be a shift in our thinking about how the growth is going to impact us. And it's going to take time, because right now, I know in town who's really good at collecting data and getting numbers for us. But if the province says, you may think you're busy, but you're not busy, how do you go forward with that information? It's very difficult. So I've been through that a few times, and so the whole issue around volume, I think, is going to have to be addressed. Political expediency places us in a difficult position. Stadelbauer is the perfect example, because we have 3 roads that have been truncated within the Serena Park area, within the village area. Because that was the first subdivision, and it was hard for people to accept it. It was very, very difficult, very unpalatable. And so now these close connectors to neighborhoods become problematic in terms of, well, what is that connection going to be? Is it going to be for a walker? Is it going to be for a cyclist? Or are we going to expect to move vehicles through there? But I did hear you quite clearly, and I appreciated your comment about moving people down from Stadelbauer and getting safely across the road and then moving into that area that was for the community. So maybe that is the solution, but sometimes as politicians we make decisions because at the time that's the best we can do for the people that are going to be affected. I like the time of day restrictions for deliveries, because fundamentally I believe that there are still things that we can do without doing anything that will control movement, and time of day restrictions is one of those. So it's not that we've got, we have some very large trucks that are coming in, but our streets are very narrow, so it's a big problem. But that is something that we can do. Data on trucks, the whole business about the weigh scales. I was a little annoyed when I saw that terminology that there may be a problem. I'm telling you there's a problem. You need to listen. However, we're going to have to collect some more data on that, and we need to do everything we can to keep that volume off of our streets, because it's just creating congestion that we don't need. And soil movement from out of Lincoln, this is another one. This is ours to solve. It doesn't need to be in this book. We should be doing these things anyway. And you know, we're having a real problem with speeding in the neighborhoods, and so there will need to be some enforcement, and I think we're going to deal with that. But it is a tremendous relief, not the bulk of it, but it's a tremendous relief to have almost every situation that you could conjure up in your mind addressed in here. And so maybe they won't entirely roll out the way you're partially prescribing them. But I think there's opportunity for flexibility here, and that's where I hope that the public will get involved with us and ask more questions. Because now that you see it in writing, I think it does mean more. But overall, the whole idea of these master plans being valuable guides for council, and being able to know and trust that we have experts in our midst and making sure that we maintain those. You know, I think councillors, that this is something that, again, this is something that we can resolve, knowing that we have good partners at the region, and that we trust them is going to be very important. Thank you. And you've done a great job presenting it, and you've been a very decent person to deal with. I think you're very patient with people that have a lot of emotion about this subject, so thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see no one else in the queue. So, Mr. Sears, I agree with Mayor Easton, and from someone that has been involved in the community for the last 2 years, and you mentioned you live in Markham. You know, one of the takeaways from me, I agree with Mayor Easton completely when she says, you know, when you start seeing the data, like we live in the community, we hear from people that have moved here that they're not happy with delays, but one of the takeaways for me is when you start looking at these intersections and you look at the capacities and the data that we've got, I mean, and when I sat down with Walter and Dave yesterday to prepare for this meeting, you know, they were telling me, you know, the good news is, and we're not talking about intersections or signalization, we're talking about our road structure. It's in good shape. And yes, we need to prepare for the future, whether it's a GO train or moving Mountain Street to Bartlett. But, you know, when you look at the data, I mean, we don't have any E's and F's. Like, we don't have any very long traffic delays. We don't have any extreme delays and encounters. Like, you know, we've got average traffic delays in most of our areas. Like, that's this is jumping out to me. I'd like to, if you could comment on that, whether, you know, that was something, you know, as someone that came in to champion this project for the last 2 years, coming from the GTA and listening to what you heard and now the data, I'd just like to see if you could comment on that.
Thank you for that question, Chair. And that is a big thing that we're trying to grapple with. I do not live here. I've said that, and that is on the table, and our office is in Markham as well. And so we're grappling with you who have lived here, and maybe you've lived here for a long time. Before, you might have had a 5-second delay, and now you have a 20-second delay. So you're like, Brett, our delay has quadrupled. You've got to do something. But that 20-second delay is considered in the profession to be okay. And so that's where we're trying to balance the use of the funds. We could put up a traffic signal at every intersection. We could widen every road. But that wouldn't necessarily solve the problem. It might solve it for the short term. It wouldn't solve it for the long term, and we'd be bankrupt. So we have spent a good amount of time trying to look at these items as objectively as we can, and also to take the local perspective. And the Stadelbauer one is one that we have studied in some detail, and that is one example where if you look strictly at the vehicle volumes, you wouldn't touch it. But we're looking at other things. And so we've looked at maybe 15 intersections, some of them signalized, some of them unsignalized, across the town. And it's our professional opinion that you're probably okay, or I'll take out the word probably. We feel that you're okay. We think the Stadelbauer at King has a lot of merit. That is a regional intersection. We have to work with them. And there's been some discussion if it's a full signal for everyone or if it only be for like a pedestrian, because we're trying to get people over to the Fleming Center. But, so I appreciate that comment, and hopefully you can see where we're coming from in terms of we want to set you up for success, and we want to be responsive to your needs, but we're also trying to balance that and help me understand also that how do we balance that perception? Somebody's delay quadrupled, but typically we wouldn't spend the money to try to change that. We would consider that is going to be okay. So that's why we've looked at some geometric improvements, and we only had some minor ones really. And the only real intersection we looked at that we're recommending an improvement is on the King and Stadelbauer.
Yeah, it's very interesting, you know, when you try to think about how this all connects. And, you know, we just launched an active transportation committee in Lincoln in 2017, and before that we weren't working, you know, through that lens. And now for the last 3 years, everything we look at is through that active transportation lens when we're talking about, you know, planning and development and parks, connectivity. And, you know, some of the issues that we have today, you know, we can't control. Like, we're having traffic that's coming into our downtown. It's not because of what we're doing here in town. It's because of that thing called the Queen Elizabeth Highway. And every week, the traffic is backed up. They're getting off in Hamilton because they've come down from the 403 and the Alexander Link, and so they're coming through Grimsby, and then they're backed up to Lincoln Avenue. But, you know, we've got a thing that we're trying to push for called the GO. So, you know, all these things are going to be running in sync, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see how we incorporate all these things as we move forward. And I think we're very fortunate that we have a good relationship with the region, and that Councillor Foster is there to fight with us, and we look forward to working through with this document for the next number of years. Before I close, I just ask if Director or Walter have any final comments.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, we're very pleased with this final document. We're really happy with the results of it, and we appreciate council's support with the different engagement exercise we did. That was great, and the community came out. Really enjoyed working with the region, Carolyn and her team. So it's been a real success from our perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. There being no further discussion, we have a motion. The motion is to receive for information report PW 2519, Draft Transportation Master Plan, and endorse and adopt the Town of Lincoln Draft Transportation Master Plan, including the recommendations and implementation strategy contained within. We will require a mover for the motion. Mayor Easton. All in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.5, CS 20-19, Design and Build Services for Lincoln's Action Sports Facility Project Award. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive for information report CS 20-19 regarding the award of contract for design and build services for Lincoln's Action Sports Facility, and to approve awarding of contract to New Line Skate Parks NLS in the amount of $494,575.22, excluding HST, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. And we will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Timmers, all in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.6, PW 26-19, Truck Safety Update. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, regarding the ownership or the possible ownership of Mountain Street, would that be the entire street of the entire Mountain Road or Mountain Street that we're looking at hopefully acquiring?
Director Graham?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor, the section that we're referring to would be from Fly Road all the way down to King Street.
Okay, so the questions I have is there a timeline for when we would like to see this happen? And is there any expense to us as a municipality should we acquire ownership with regards to maintenance and care for this road or liability?
Director Graham?
Through Mr. Chairman to the councillor, so sort of the long-term vision for this, the concept is when we get the new escarpment crossing established, Bartlett Road and Grimsby up to Park Road, there's already been a commitment in the master planning process for that from the region that then we would get Mountain Street as the town once that is in place. So that's kind of already been established as a long-term plan. I think the purpose of this report that we're looking at tonight, when we're talking about council's concerns around truck safety, we're asking to look at taking it over much sooner than that. And you know, if that was something that we worked out with the region, then yeah, we would, if we're the road authority and it's our road, then we would be responsible for maintaining it. I mean, we'd have control over the road. I think that was the objective of this whole position, was that if we had control over it, then we could, you know, restrict trucks or do modifications like that. So
It's just the concern through you, is just the concern I have is the timing of the acquisition, that the road is in, becomes an asset, not a liability. Like if there's a certain cost benefit, or if there's a certain, the benefits outweigh the risk with regards to this, the timing of this acquisition is my main concern with that. So I'm not sure if that's been considered or not. That's the only thing. Thank you.
Mary Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate that staff have put the action items in this table and that this will be able to come forward to us on a fairly regular basis. I'm hoping that as we go along that staff also adopt a very action-oriented language in this. Even in some ways, once certain things have taken place, like the discussions, that we make sure that what we put on this right-hand column actually are those active initiatives that we intend to push, because otherwise it's going to become a very passive, pleasant thing to read, and that wasn't the intention of that motion in the first place. I think that Councillor Mikulic's comment in terms of the condition of the whole road, not just the piece that we know that was done, you know, that it would be pretty easy to update that information, and it is important. However, it is going to be, I think, about 15 years, and so we definitely need to be in a position to control the types of trucks that are coming down. And the region is not, I mean, there's no ability for them to decide that they can limit certain weights, because their whole raison d'etre for having regional roads relates to the fact that they are for goods movement. And so we need to do something separately. So that piece really needs to be pursued. And maybe it's time now, with what we know, and we've got this document now on the table, maybe we need to prioritize some of these and see where that takes us. But I think, Mr. Chairman, that my concern right now is that we maintain very active language. I didn't appreciate the fact that the blitz had taken place and that there was a delay. Every one of those blitzes needs to have the most active and aggressive media releases assigned to them every time, not some of the time, every time. That was an outrageous, absolutely outrageous outcome. 24 trucks, and 19 of them had major, major issues. How could you not be absolutely disgusted by that? And what kind of trucks are these? So we're not going to put sand and gravel in with everybody else with the work that they do. What kind of trucks are these? Well, the Blitz didn't tell us what they were. And where did they come from? So there's a good deal more to this. So we're either in to find out exactly everything we can about this so that council can lay out firm policies in terms of how we're going to deal with it, or we're not. And if we're not, then I think we should tell the people that. And that is not the direction that we're going. So we need to ramp this up. And there was another check that took place. I've forgotten it now. But again, these things need to get into the paper. People need to be very, very, they need to be gobsmacked by the results of what's going on in terms of vehicle safety. Because otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for us to get the information we need. And I would like to also add, I don't want to see language in here, Mr. Chairman, like may. If we're not sure, then we need to be investing in finding out whether trucks are coming off the highway onto our roads because they're avoiding the weigh scale. And that needs to happen soon. Anyway, it's great progress. I'm not whining, but I'm not giving up either. I want to see some very tangible results. Thank you.
I think the other area you might have been referring to was the community safety zone in front of Tony Valley School that
Yes,
just
that was
recently got
another
blitzed,
one.
yeah.
Dreadful.
So before I go to Councillor Timmers, I'm just going to ask the CAO, based on a meeting, the last meeting we had at AMO with Transport Minister Carolyn Mulrooney. We had a great delegation with Ron Tripp organizing that, along with Mayor Bylsma. So I just want to go to CAO Kirkopoulos to talk about maybe some timing and some of the things that we plan on doing as a municipality to move that Bartlett Park crossing forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity just to provide a little bit of context, and I wanted to jump in when Councillor Mikulik was speaking about Mountain. I have reached out to Regional Acting CAO Ron Tripp to start the conversation on Mountain. While I think it is early, I think it's important that we have frequent conversations on that in an effort to accelerate the timing. One of the things that we're also having conversations with internally, because I think if we do accept that road and we do make some of the necessary changes we need to make in terms of where we're rerouting traffic down Bartlett, I know Director Graham and I had a meeting earlier this week as we talked about our capital plan to look at the necessary upgrades that are going to be required for Bartlett. So I think as you look at more of our 3 to 5 to 10 year outlook on capital, you're going to see things in there for Bartlett. The reason those are in there is because, and again, we may be fluid, those may move slightly, but I think as we look at the potential of Mountain and when that comes, there's some other things that are going to need to happen and that are going to be triggered as a result of that. But the conversations with the region will continue. I don't know how fruitful they will be in terms of timing. I know Mr. Tripp is open to have conversations like that to determine what is the most appropriate timing. Aware that I think council's not supportive of waiting until an escarpment crossing and the north-south Bartlett piece gets done, which will be more in the long term. So we will continue to update council on those, and those conversations will continue. But again, as you see things in our capital outlook, that's why things that maybe weren't there in the past will be there as we start to prepare and look at appropriate timing.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. As far as this report, I was very happy to see the progress, that we are making progress and that it is on paper. Just that fact made me quite happy to see that. I appreciate the comments from our CAO around Mountain Street. I would hate to think that we're going to be waiting 20 years or the long term. That's just way too long. And I think I agree we have to keep on that. Keep pushing for it. My one comment I had was around the community safety zone on Victoria Avenue, which is fantastic, and I'm really pleased to see that. But I'd like to see a community safety zone on Mountain Street as well in front of St. Mark's School. And I think we have to keep pushing, and I think that'll be one more thing that will slow those trucks down, pass through that school zone. And I don't know what it's going to take to get a community safety zone in that area as well, but that's something that I would really like to see happen, and I know other people would as well. So that's basically my, I don't have a question, that's just my comment. So thank you.
Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did see Regional Councillor Foster gesturing and mouthing the words to me that it's coming, and so I just wanted to share that on the record.
Councillor Patriva.
Thanks, Chair Brunei, and I really like this document. I think it's fantastic. But, and thank you, Councillor Foster, for committing to the community safety zone for Mountain Street. I really appreciate it. One of our other maybe bullet points that we could add for the reduction of speed and specific enforcement measures, and coming right up tonight's transportation master plan, might be the installation of speed cushions. Asking the region to install some speed cushions on Mountain Street. Mr. Chairman, you're very well. We heard this at the door. We continue to get emails of people speeding on Mountain Street, people actually passing cars on that flat. So maybe a speed cushion, which is similar to a speed hump, but smaller designed and allows emergency vehicles to go over it, would help reduce the speed. So looking to add maybe that bullet point, and Councillor Foster, if he could take that forward, we would be greatly appreciated.
Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. So The CAO just brought up Bartlett Street in conjunction with speaking about taking over Mountain Road. And that was a question that I had earlier on, but I didn't ask it. I forgot to ask. And that in the Transportation Master Plan, there's proposed for updates to Bartlett. So is that exactly what we're talking about there? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
But before we go to Bartlett, trucks can't make a right-hand turn off a mountain onto King. So that intersection needs to be improved, and of course, that's a regional road, so. There being no further discussion, we have a motion to receive for information report PW 26-19, the truck safety update. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Pachariva. All in favor? And that is carried. As previously mentioned, we have a notice of motion being brought forward by Councillor Rinjema and endorsed by Councillor Russell regarding the Town of Lincoln's resolution to be delivered to the Niagara Regional Police Services and Niagara Region, if required, for their consideration regarding education and awareness and additional enforcement options pertaining to speeds and traffic safety. In order for this item to be added and considered, we require a 2/3 vote. So I would ask your pleasure on moving this. And that is carried. So we have a notice of motion brought forward by Councillor Rinjema and Councillor Russell for consideration this evening. I will read the notice of motion. Whereas improving neighborhood street safety, comfort, and livability are top priorities for neighborhoods across Lincoln, and whereas we are considering a draft transportation master plan and active transportation strategy at tonight's Community Services and Infrastructure meeting, and whereas the World Health Organization reports that pedestrian safety increases when speeds are reduced, and whereas complete streets principles being adopted in Lincoln and other municipalities identify lower neighborhood street speeds as crucial to improving walkability, increasing street safety, and enhancing community livability, and whereas truck traffic and transportation movement remain critical issues throughout Lincoln, and whereas enforcement is a key tool in changing behavior around speeds and traffic safety, therefore be it resolved that Council directs the CAO and the key staff to reach out to NRPS, Niagara Regional Police Services, and Niagara Region if required, in order that Town of Lincoln, in collaboration with the NRPS, continue building awareness in the form of education and to consider innovative and additional enforcement options such as photo radar and enforcement through off-duty or supplemental officers. Councillor Rinjema, would you like to comment on this motion?
Thank you, Chair Brune. As Mr. Sears from WSP said, spoke to us earlier on, he said that our Transportation Master Plan is a high-level policy plan. It's not necessarily where the rubber hits the road. But through this process of establishing this Transportation Master Plan, from the detailed evaluation of what we have and what we need, we've learned a lot, and we're ready to take some actions. With regard to neighborhood safety, pedestrian safety, we've heard over and over that some people are driving carelessly and don't feel safe, and people don't feel safe, particularly along our north-south roads in our residential neighborhoods. So this motion seeks to set in place firm actions to deal with safety issues so that we can feel as comfortable as possible and as safe as possible walking, driving, and living in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councillor, for bringing that forward and for that those comments. Before we go to a vote, I'm just going to go to our CAO to make sure that he understands what is being requested here in this motion, to see if he has any comments before we move forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity just briefly to speak to this particular motion. I know Director Graham and I had a conversation on this as well earlier today. I think from a staff perspective, we're clear on the direction here. It is exploratory at this particular point in time. I think we're we're very clear on, once we go out and reach out and have the conversations with NRPS, we will be back before council. Should there be any budgetary implications, we will be back before you seeking approval and direction to proceed. But definitely at this particular point in time, I think it is exploratory, but from the safety perspective, I think it's a good motion, and something that I think you're hearing. Mr. Sears earlier commented on the prevalence of Vision Zero and policies around safety. That is definitely where the industry is going, where municipalities are going, and so staff will definitely explore this particular opportunity and option with NRPS as well as Niagara Region, should there be any additional opportunities, and report back.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Are there any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I am now calling for a vote on the motion. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Russell, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Item 8, confidential items. We have no other confidential items to consider this evening. Staff remarks. Do we have any staff remarks? Director McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to bring to council's attention and welcome and thank Jessica Wilson, who's in the gallery this evening. Jessica is our Cultural Development Coordinator and in her second week with the town. So I look forward to introducing you to her after the meeting. Thank you.
Seeing no other staff remarks, we move to committee remarks. And I am going to read something here before I go to Mayor Easton. As brought forward by our Communications Department, we have been asked to share the following. As part of the town's continuing efforts to reach our community in a number of ways, I am pleased to announce that we have now 2 new social media accounts for residents on Facebook and Instagram. Play Lincoln On and Culture Lincoln On. Follow Culture Lincoln to experience local culture, heritage, museum, programming, and events. Follow Play Lincoln to experience recreation programs and services, community events, parks, green spaces, and facility information. We hope you take this opportunity to explore these 2 new ways to connect with us. Do we have any other committee remarks? Mayor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 things that I would like to speak with council about. One thing to speak with council about, but it really does involve the staff. Mr. Chairman, the CAO and I have been having some discussions over the last month. And, you know, we are, as a council, going to be making a lot of decisions over the next few months when it comes to budgets and how we want to move forward. And the depth of the discussions and are really borne out in these master plans that we have, and it reinforces how important it is for us to have a really strong relationship in terms of the way we conduct business and also how we work with the staff. And so it has been important for me to, in my own commitment to the CAO in regard to this whole business of decision points and what decisions are the jurisdiction of the CAO and which decisions are the jurisdiction of council. So in the past, I know that we've always talked about this issue of getting in the weeds. However, I find that the getting in the weeds phraseology isn't helpful in terms of the boundaries. And so it's better, I believe, and I think we need to pursue this more, to be able to say, that is a decision for the CAO, this is a decision for council, and be very clear about that. We've had, for the last 4 years, I would say that we have had the halcyon days of accomplishments in the last 4 years. And I want to acknowledge staff for the tremendous increase in workload that they've taken on. They have delivered project by project over the last 4 years. And in particular, I think that there was a special brand of innovation and creativity and a depth of care around service delivery to our citizens that goes way beyond just doing a good job. I felt it important to speak to this tonight because we are really on the cusp of beginning again. And it's very important, I think, to keep our house in order so that staff never feel that, they should always feel that we're pushing them, God forbid, but always with great appreciation and concern for their well-being. So I just wanted you to know that I'm going to be meeting with all of you soon, and there's a book that the CAO has suggested, and I looked at it and I agree with him that we should all be reading. It's one of the guidebooks by George Cuff, and it really speaks to the council experience. We really do need to become extremely effective in our policy role and understand it entirely in order for us to represent the people to the very best, in the very best way we can. I think it was in the first year that the CAO came to work at the town, and we had completed his first evaluation. And I asked Mike if I could come to the SMT meeting, which is really unusual. It's only in very unusual circumstances now that the mayor would ever go to an SMT meeting. It's not necessary because you speak through the CAO. But I wanted the senior management team to understand that council was very satisfied with the CAO and that our expectations were very well laid out, and I think we talked about them at the time. And I remember at the time asking the staff, who most of them were very, very senior, it was before we started having any change, if there were issues for them, what were the barriers to their work? And I think it's always, I find it absolutely essential, and it makes me feel good when someone will speak truth to power and say, you know what, if you just paid attention, as this person did, if you just paid attention to making decisions, good decisions, don't refer things, don't defer things, we'll produce the best reports we can. You just need to make decisions. And I have never forgotten that. And there have been very few occasions when we have either deferred or referred because the reports that we are getting are very, very complete. And I think it's good when staff can say that, when they will speak truth to power and say, you need to do this. So having said that, I now want to talk to you about something really serious, and this is a very personal thing for me, and I hope that that you will listen and pay attention. I had a discussion with the CAO about this over the last 4 days, and I've lost about 5 nights' sleep on this now. And Monday night, when we came to the meeting, and I had already had help from the CAO and the clerk, from Julie Kirkelos, on the matter of how we were going to deal with the whole issue of the appendices that were presented and issued along with the whistleblowing policy, which now became a pyramid on top of the policy that we already had in terms of the code of conduct. So if you don't know this, I'm going to tell you, and then don't ever forget it because I'm not going to change. You are not going to find a person who has ever been in a leadership role. I wish this wasn't the truth, but it is. I will not tolerate. There is absolutely there is no commodity, there is no measurement that I can give you in regard to issues like harassment, bullying, and just downright failing to do one's work in terms of cooperation and collaboration. I have no tolerance for it. And as I've said to you, we have always been very fortunate to have the staff that we have here. And it's not easy for them because we are very demanding. I am demanding, but they have performed. So when that policy came forward, I was very annoyed and I was insulted that anybody would insert policies that A, had never been approved, B, weren't properly set up so that we knew exactly what was going on, and I was really mad. So when I have conversations with the CAO, I don't expect him to deal with my drama, but at the same time, I'm not going to be insulted. I am the mayor, you are the council, and there is a respect factor here. So anybody who thinks that they can slide things through this council needs to understand it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because I'm reading every word. It's going to happen because people can be trusted. So this must stop. And I'm putting it on the table tonight. Why? Because my decision point has nothing to do with evaluating staff. But I believe that I do have a decision point, and I believe that council has a decision point on this matter of what we will tolerate and what we won't. So I had a conversation with our legal counsel tonight, and I told him that I didn't want to be unreasonable, but at the same time, I wasn't passing this over. Now, you may just think that this is my thing, and that's fine. But I'm not leaving it, I'm not taking it off the table. So he recommended, and we've since spoken to the CAO, that there are people who will come in and have conversations. I really feel that I need to speak to somebody about this who can guide me. There may be other staff that may need this as well. There may be other counselors who want to have these conversations. But I want everyone to understand that in the town of Lincoln, not only will this behavior not be tolerated, but we will find resources to help us deal with this in a civilized manner. Because we just cannot come up with a 500-page document and expect to make any progress on it at all unless we are all working together. So I'm not apologizing for the emotion. It's just that that's my standard. And I told Mike 3 weeks ago that after the experience that I had with the situation at the region, that there are certain behaviors that people exhibit that I will no longer tolerate. And when those people exhibit the issues around integrity, when they can't get along with people, when they refuse to collaborate, when they don't recognize the good value that other people put in, when they embarrass the community, I am not dealing with those people. I am not dealing with them. We have plenty of people around here to deal with, and that's just going to be my standard here on in, because this whole business of integrity has become a major issue for all politicians at all levels, and I've met my ethical bottom line now, and that's how I'm going to respond. So thank you very much. I'll talk to anybody about it anytime you wish. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Patriva.
Thanks, Chair Brune. Just a quick note to our CAO, Mr. Kokopoulos. We received, and I shared with you, and Councillor Brune received a couple of emails, and you conducted a site visit with Mr. Bruder today, so I thank you very much. In our meeting tonight, I've received another very lengthy email that I will share with you and Mr. Graham and with Mr. Bruder and Mrs. Dale about the development going on south of our town, connecting Stadelbauer subdivision. So just high level, what you were able to ascertain, a little plan of action, because I said I would share that with the residents.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think Councillor Patriva is looking for a response on that. I did go out for a site visit with Mr. Bruder earlier. We did drive through various developments. I think in the past we had had a good setup with our local developers in terms of road cleanings, and that had continued. I think sometimes post-storms, post-weather, we sometimes experience more on the road. It seems like going back to that frequency of constant reminders with our developers, however unfortunate, is going to be what we're going to have to go back to. And so while it's unfortunate and you would expect that these things are happening more on a proactive basis and are occurring, I think we are going to have to revert back to being a little bit more vigilant, a little bit more mindful, and reminding them of their responsibilities as well.
Councillor Patriva?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bernay, and thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that. And after I share tonight's email with you too, we'll need our developer to talk to his subs and the way that they treat the residents and the way that they clean up and the way that they maintain their site and the way that they conduct business too, all needs to come under a certain amount of scrutiny because it's not the Wild West and there are rules and you will abide by the rules, and it's just that simple. You want to do business in our town, there's rules, and you will follow them. And especially on these infill developments that we've put ourselves to a higher level to say that will not impact the existing residents, and unfortunately, that's not the case.
Do we have any other committee remarks? Seeing none, there be no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.